doubles. Plugged in. Is there an outlet?
I also would.
I'm gonna sit here if it's alright. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
You can stay in that spot if you want. Pull up a chair right here.
The house should be sent whenever it's ready.
Second, I just have to connect to the Wi-Fi. Just one more second. Nearly ready. Okay, now I'm ready.
Anyways, everyone good? Alright. Advantage 1 is the economy. The impending housing crisis is the root cause of economic inequality. 2008 inflation and pandemic mean we're on the brink in COLA 23. Shortage of homes, driver inequality, climate change, low productivity, growth, US restrictions, million recession, pandemic, complex, limited difficult interest, with housing more affordable, 2005, urban driver inequalities, housing improvements, income, good land, home ownership, driver of wealth, condition 9% in the top 20% on homes, less than half, and bottom 20% to the choice rental rates, and prefer a focus on building structural resilience to existential risk over specific scenarios. Reducing inequality is key to avoiding all existential risks, written Judge 21. Inequality reduction decreases existential risk, inequality increases carbon institutions, improve tackling existential risk, elite capture, reduce quality, and public goods, inequality, reduce stress, lower inequality, exhibit better outcomes and resilience, conflict with nuclear or biogenic virus, AI, polarization, increasing conflict, inequality, increasing polarization, populist candidates selected, less cooperative and prefer riskier policy, inequality, reinforce competition, and independently relying on private sector development makes boom and bust cycles inevitable. Only the app can stabilize the economy. Cyrus 22. A solution: social housing can provide for all private building erratic surges depending on cycle, not the needs for crisis, new not done private buildings are known set to maximizing profit development, catered to luxury and public housing operator local authorities. Units require outside subsidies. Social housing addresses all problems. Every segment will get more supply risk. Kept low government just require profit. Social housing stabilize construction instead of boom and bust causing labor shortages, bankruptcy, layoffs, stabilize building employment, to stabilize the economy. Vienna had success, and instability guarantees an economic crisis that will escalate quickly and unpredictably. It's coming now. Pilkington 23. Commercial real estate all but collapse. Interest rate vacancy squeeze the sector. Liquidity will turn to toxic capital to be wiped. The residential price falling since June did not rally again. Driver recession lands in the construction real estate. There's been a key driver recession that's income fall. Knock effects of the recession. Construction jobs quickly. Mortgage slowdown looks like a step in which starts to construction layoffs this winter. And the U.S. drives the direction of the global economy, which spills over. Coastal 17. This is the world's largest economy according to global output, given tight shocks of global recession since 1960 coincided with the U.S. as the center of trade, financial network, supply chains, and that cascades, which leads to a nuclear war, Lu 18. In the current landscape of economic crisis that escalates to a major global conflict, almost bankrupted housing collapse, bubbles will trigger another economic crisis that could be more severe than the last, distress, fuel unrest, terrorism, or war during the Great Depression, people held with the decade of World War II, more worrying in the view of other factors to contingent to tech disruption, migration, polarization, and nationalism, all trigger points, until as the chief proxy wars raging, the experts lead to a large-scale global conflagration. Advantage 2 is the environment. Lack of housing drives climate change. Only addressing a lack of supply can solve. Golden 23. Blocking housing major drives of oil consumption, supplies, a climate imperative, conservation hinges addressing shortage, fuel shocks to fossil fuels, the largest source of pollution, housing can reduce pollution more effectively than any other option, and the plan solves all causes, spurs renewables innovation. Rosen 23. Advances require people and research to come together. Geographical sectoral strength essential to add energy transition. Housing prices become a barrier to innovation. Working in close proximity become impossible. San Francisco costs risen beyond tech workers, residents flood without housing close to clusters and scaling companies innovation. Yet worse, agglomeration depends on the ability to physically concentrate. And U.S. green development solves globally, catalyzes renewables transition, and sufficiently reduces emissions. Hard 23. Fossil fuels account 80% of production, but the largest contributor to climate change. Science is clear. Renewables emit little gases. Renewables refuel growth, increase GDP, job producing dependency, and stabilizing prices. Given science, U.S. renewable potential 200 times the world. With example of bringing the worst impacts, the country has some of the best natural resources, innovation, and business. Renewables could triple and 740 billion per year. Use fossil fuels dominate costs is falling. Innovation advances. Solar shipping and nuclear coal, largest contributor trend in the U.S. supporting the globe. When strong enough to supply 20% hydropower can power the grid immediately. Reliable, flexible backup solar is a power 40%. Employ 1.5 million. Solar costs for 3%. And warming is existential. Tipping point in mass structural violence coming soon. Best science proves. Prop 23. Self-reinforcing feedback push to how house tipping points change the climate, the loss of glaciers, or Amazon are examples of broad nonlinear irreversible cascading events lead to profound changes. Impacts have been faster, more extreme than forecasted. Feedback is not fully accounted for. IPCC has been overly conservative. Thermal maximum for distance. They see the emissions horizon will not plateau. Risks are existential, and independently squalid living conditions breed viruses that quickly spread. The homeless are uniquely vulnerable. Gorman 19. Infectious diseases are resurging around the country. Typhus hepatitis A erupted among homeless. Disease can easily jump beyond the homeless. Flat-footed homeless grown spread quickly and widely outside and shelters by crowded conditions. These continue where eating and sleeping given the lack of housing. Vacuum to immune system are worsened by stress, malnutrition, and sleep deprivation. All the distressful that the healthcare more needs to be done, including affordable housing. That leads to extinction. Demand is 21. COVID-19 shows dangers of extinction due to disease. Worst pandemic strikes in the near future. The guy harbored billions of viruses capable of affecting vital organs, easy resulting in extinction and solvency. Plan the United States ought to guarantee an enforceable right to housing. Solvency is empirically proven. Only a kitchen sink rights-based framework solves. Charge 21. 3/4 of Americans believe housing is a right to housing. All responsibility to the government. What about diverting resources to public housing vouchers intended for private development, market regulation, legal due process protections, current framework use commodity. The right gives a tool for holding government accountable for Scotland, South Africa, Africa to adopt a right improved housing includes an individual right to sue Scotland's homelessness free, fair, and non-recurring, and only a rights-based approach solves. Best studies prove. Fitzpatrick et al. 14. Empirical like comparing this rights-based slash system, non-rights average system argues towards housing support demonstrate better outcomes of rights and psychosocial impacts. Impacts no depend on legal challenges, but parameters, rights passed in the crowd committing policy objective finding a key with broader international evidence, and that solves warming. Proof. All 23. Governments must build their housing systems around the right to housing. This requires indivisibly with the environment. Governments hold private actors accountable. Licensing and bylaw should realize the right environmentally ensure strategy and consultation with stakeholders. Decarbonization of housing. 23. Supply should match the government should not fall into market rates. Housing homes are triggered and solve crisis. A high emission construction should be with the optimizing the existing environment. And right to housing represents a transformative demand that enables mass mobilization. Reject impractical calls for a revolution that ignored material conditions. Baden and Marcus 2016. Criticizing right to not grasp and dismissing rights politics. Right to housing implies fundamental challenges around which a mass movement can mobilize. In the absence, housing is abandoned to market. Right to housing requires fundamental change in the structures of society. Housing is done by powerful actors. Maintaining the scope of the safety problem is absolutely necessary for any solution. More way for the messianic revolution. Abandon efforts to the means and the best responses to change current conditions toward realizing demands accomplishable in the world. Point in the direction of deeper change, efficiency, reforms our system, maintaining choose word demand system, challenging and make the system more resilient but improve present conditions while enabling building of a different world to make their most actionable, transformative, or the best framework. This change is maximizing expected well-being, preferred utilism, partial, specific to public actors, results infinite rigor, just explains all value. Green 15. Utilism must understand back to the tragedy, morality, or charge of different values based on different ways. Electors all choose some kind of common metric. Utilism, partial, such as decision makers who are everyone interested is equal, matters for everything. The answer is quality of conscious experience. Why care? Come to the quality of experience. Whether the work to need to make money, at least live, sleep is cold, strong, being cold, is bad, them to pleasure and pain. It's a good state to resolve complex disagreements with respect to overall experience. And skip the second green card. Adopt a hybridizing strategy, exploiting contradiction to hegemonic discourse, maintains critical distance while effectively challenging the state. Kaporo 8. A hybridizing strategy policies ideological apparatus is deconstructible, publicly shaming the hegemon involves manipulating strangers within institutions, cultivating allies, hybridizing words with dominant discourse when you speak their language, the master cannot easily dismiss or crush you, and using the government as a heuristic is better pragmatically and forces us to truly investigate political structures in search of ways to improve instead of using abstract solutions for concrete impacts. Naughty 13. Resistance are not limited to rejection these struggles constitute the strictly government to rationalize at the same time exceeding transform these questions over simplifications and nurtures radical skepticism about universally good about actors or abstract solutions to political problems. Governmentality heuristic focuses on complex diagnostics of events. These foster political engagement would not wait the revolution that would twist the power playing with whatever cards are available, require reflexivity on the consequences of political choices.
What inequality does the act solve?
Sure. We argue in the Zinkula evidence that housing inequality is one of the biggest sources of overall inequality. It says it's the primary driver of U.S. wealth inequality, which means that by increasing housing affordability and access to people within America, we decrease one of the biggest sources of inequality, which
so
is
I guess what does the plan do?
What do you want to explain like the solvency section? Okay, cool. So what the plan does is that we guarantee an enforceable right to housing. In the solvency section, we make a bunch of predictions as to what that would be implemented as. For example, the TARS evidence says that when you guarantee a right to housing, that would allocate responsibility to the government to realize the right. That can take form in a bunch of different ways, like public housing, vouchers, and zoning reform, but those are not things that we fiat, rather those are predictions that we make.
On the sort of climate spillover stuff, how do you make China and Russia follow through with US climate policies?
Yeah, so the HAR 23 evidence makes a few claims. One is that the US is the best natural resources and innovation, and it's already sort of fueling this renewable transition across the world. It says that the US is supporting measures around the globe in developing nations as well to build renewable energy infrastructure. Also,
So why does that necessitate that China cares?
We would argue that by the US setting a worldwide example of leading the renewable energy transition, China would therefore have an incentive to also do better in terms of renewable energy. Also, we have evidence that says renewables are cheaper and just better in general, so there's no reason why China wouldn't, unless you can read evidence that says China is out to get the US and doesn't want to help their own people.
Alright, that's fine, I guess.
Or environment.
So on the sort of what is the warrant for why economic decline caused war in the Liu evidence?
Yeah, the Liu evidence specifically talks about how when there's economic distress, that leads to things like unrest, terrorism, and war, because one of antipathy against it talks about the specific example of the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act and how that shrunk trade by 2/3, and then World War II followed.
It also says 08 almost bankrupted. Why did that then not cause?
Yeah, well, it also says in the next sentence, the collapse of asset price bubbles would trigger another economic crisis, one that could be even more severe than the last, which we definitely argue that would happen unless we do the app.
The sort of what is it? I guess how does the app solve the economy? How does housing affordability increase it?
Yeah, well, one, we argue that there is a sort of we're on the brink of a major housing crisis. The Pilkington evidence says that mass construction layoffs are coming this winter, which means only by injecting money into the economy through government stimulus and housing can we prevent that mass layoff from coming and that recession from coming. We also talk about how the government acts as a stabilizer, because right now we're relying on the private sector, which is constrained to boom and bust Sorry?
What's the warrant in Diamandis?
Yeah, the Diamandis evidence talks about how it says the words that the worst pandemic could strike us in the near future.
Yeah, so what does that then mean, extinction?
It says diseases could result in extinction.
Yeah, but why? Okay.
Because what's the order?
1 second. It'll just be one off, and then econ environment, and then another one.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, one off, econ, environment, another off.
Okay, I'm ready when everyone else is.
The philosophy of housing first standardizes and conceals the inner workings of the system by tucking away people who act as the most obvious signs of its failure into public housing, while fundamentally failing to address the reasons these crises happen to begin with. Hennigan 13. Housing first confront poverty produced by neoliberal policy of failure, working exactly as it must. Neoliberal urbanism to protect accumulation, allocation, profit for neoliberal property governance through cost-benefit analysis, pulls in and contains most visible obstacles to accumulation, most efficient means not perfect for capital, broken and just perspective will not reform management, segmentation, criminalization, or stop people dying, not impel, care more about citizens, not in poverty, is not radical, provide housing a fraction, make us feel good, reproduce geographies and subsidize accumulation of homeless decisions that reproduce homelessness and maintain legitimacy by hiding symbols of contradiction, homelessness in the poor, and channeling the mass desire for housing into a state-backed right to housing as a concession to the present neoliberal state system. It depoliticizes the oppressed and ensures failure for any revolutionary praxis. E-Law 16. Channeling the reason to state through rights, depoliticized population, limiting policy structure, internal state power demands, diverse into legal frameworks as arbiter leads to withdrawal changes are palliatives that conceal by rendering legitimate to the extent they map to ideological preferences, the right to enforce power, current distributions taken for granted, tensions transformed into grievances compatible with state into existing order. Police order promote choice, conformism versus imagination, rewards for accepting dominant order, little use to those who challenge it, discourse, co-op, little use pursuing that which seek change with movement, channels, desire for housing and to cry, right to housing, then mobilization, giving up on politics in favor of the political, whatever victories one cannot withstand, the tangent inherent to their form will answer the preempt here. Madden is wrong, the mass movement is bad, it's oriented towards liberalism, which is our link. That movement around rights will fail. The end goal of their movements is welfare, which breeds dependence on the state rather than building communist movements through dual power. Neoliberalism operates based on use of racialized algorithms which act as extensions of racial capitalism's code of the world. This locks in fractal fascism, precarity, and racialized violence. About 21. Capital was always a committed commodification process of corrupting qualities, quantities, racialization, information, state machines, and post-calculus, near poverty, world scale failure to address genocide, militarism, racism, pandemic, anti-blackness, extinction, render democratic governments outmoded, extraction takes a form of fascism, only direct engagement, secure victory, reading and writing code on body, surveillance, overcutting algorithms, executing on the flesh by immediate codification, violently impose reforming of body, abstraction imposed by code of race, functional redetermined, unequal redistribution, global resource, correlates race and value, imposing this globally, ecocide, and code social difference, slavery, colonialism, state formation, genocide, gender oppression, pogroms, militarization, policing, parasites in pursuit of powers, war computer, inscribing itself on everything else, war computer takes civilizational racism role, extends deeply into capitalist calculation, understand, generalization, computation, extension of capital that require calculus of social differences, include those piled by racism, recognize as practical results of an ongoing struggle between would habitals and to be dispossessed. Local instances may seem neutral. Its result of struggles attacked by oppression, abstraction emerges as codification, and understand the climate crisis as undeniably tied to neoliberalism's desire to extract cheap nature. The looming polycrisis of our time is the result of these things being finite. This disproves the 2AC's decoupling claims, because capitalism will always be parasitic on global resources, which means it is try or die for the alternative. Soccer 18. Capital Center of Equality, Order 92, rationalist law, disposition, conquer basis for capital scene, historical cap about appropriating nature at low cost through colonialism, expelled from humanity, value, use of extra economic means to extract from nature, labor, food, energy, materials, endless accumulation, commodification of resources go together, cheap nature, come to an end, cost increasing, surplus rent, and the impact is imperial ecocide. The United States and its partners are the vanguards of the sixth extinction event. Soccer 18. Assumption capital and important climate crisis fails of ecological accumulation have to towards expansion conflict inherent to cap, problematic and how explain crisis not on humans creating caste capitalism 3 fates required ensured imperial forms of domination facilitate accumulation after geologic is imperial domination tendency towards ecocide to ensure expansion ecocide exists since the beginning, bring about 6 to unprecedented rate necessary for emergence, gold and silver enslavement, conquest, plunder, imperial ecocide, different forms of logic has not only been economic, military, political, geopolitical, but about ecosystem destruction, annihilating species for resources, conquering nature, integral to partitioning the world in slave land zones, genocidal violence, dehumanizing human slavery, the destruction of species, vice and whaling, industrial characteristic, tested modern war, chemical weapons in Vietnam, pesticides aboard ag, modern and violent, unprecedented failure by U.S. to ensure climate deal, address root cause, roots of the crisis, worsening, market center solutions, strong preparedness of MIC, merely firm dealing with destructive logic of U.S.-led ecocide will sacrifice most of the human rights life forms to defend ecocidal capital, vanguard of 6 extinction capital and destroying life for 500 years, this time endangers every living creature, and vote negative to endorse a collectivist revolutionary consciousness that paves the way for post-capitalist being the overthrow of hegemonic systems by occupying and reshaping them for our purposes. Ballot 21. As a plantation and factory institute for domination basis of revolutionary consciousness against the collectivization debt, ways my career, non-capitalist becoming enable oppressed community leverage, world making capacities to occupy money range in our computation that are desires to do other than generate content build, an economy capable of recognizing mutual indebtedness, honoring contributions as we may can, take down the digital information Marxism, anti-racist feminist, queer decolonial endeavor requires we demonstrate the encroachment of the digital endemic codification over 7 centuries implies new acting schemes in the means of production constitute reverse assumption and acting that will release aspirations foreclosed by techniques endeavor of global proportions must make partisans authors of this version of value. We refuse the digital method, limit nor acceleration require complexity while embracing notion liberation can only be non-exploited and gendered by all who are oppressed. New guards and same old will not free inmates by supporting revolution that must become authors of history and interpretation. Evaluate the ideological assumptions of the 1EC prior to its consequences. Prefer one logic voting app doesn't mean the plan passes, so the 1EC is more or less a policy story akin to a piece of art. But subjectivities can be controlled for or against capitalism, which means the valid laws are offense, but not theirs too. Epistemology, both the Nazis and Western countries didn't like the Soviets, but the difference in reasoning makes them distinct. Why we do something matters just as much as the thing itself. 3 is defense. They had infinite rep and side bias. If they can't defend their rep, they should lose to encourage better research. Their inter-implements rejoinder, which means we access clash and fairness better. On econ, inequality exists because of capitalism. It's the only reason some have billions while others have nothing. How exactly can we solve that while maintaining the system? Plan is a band-aid solution that cannot overcome the structures inherent to its ideology. Decline doesn't cause war, it's a gamble. Empirical denied security is a larger cause. Well, 20. Diversionary war, unlike erotic empirical cause war, is always a gamble. Cases will be rewarded and so it's hard to imagine one debt while storing easy ways to simulate a diversion cause war. There would be a lot more 40 versus 20 or say wars. Europe, not Germany, Iraq, and Bush, no war unless quick, cheap, with reasonable probabilities, success, primary revolution, and security, long-term balance of power. As capitalism faces overaccumulation, wars, inevitable tensions between the U.S. and adversaries are bolstering by the data extract from crises at home that accelerates overaccumulation, nuclear war, climate change, fascism, and racial inequality globally. Robinson 21. Washington ramps on nuclear war, military configuration, bigger picture driving this capitalism crisis is economic stagnation and the economy crisis of capitalists. Hegemony billions of people question system groups on channel fear towards scapegoated rising tension, expanding military budgets, profit making through war. Capitalism faces overaccumulation, escalating inequality, undermining the stability of the system. Capitalist class difficulty in finding outlets to upload service. System faces a structural crisis. Economy has become dependent on warfare. Accumulation economy relies on war making industrial complex profits. Quadruple the virus, war, state, facility, states measured by physical and global weapon sales, war on drugs and terrorism have all become profit, make drive to externalize the crisis to increases. The danger, the tension will lead to war, heightened concentration, capital worldwide, worse social inequality, new Cold War will immensurate. These neo-fascist movements have proliferated as democracy breaks down, contractions on borders, on global civil war, and on climate. The U.S. has already tried to get other countries to agree to climate policies in the UN. They assert the plan solves all causes, but they're wrong. Russia and China, two of the largest industrial polluters, will keep polluting because they do not care what the U.S. says. The hard evidence says fossil fuels are 80% of current energy use now. If the 2AC stands up and says decoupling now, your RFD should be the neutral face emoji. Growth makes disease inevitable. Our internal link outweighs theirs. Aurora 20. Pandemic inflicted huge economic danger. 70% of passengers are zoonotic. Meat consumed per person doubled. Livestock spread. Pathogens rising. Meat demand. Wet markets trade. Climate change. Deforestation. Intensive farming spread deadly. Pandemic. 60% of forests have vanished. Pathogens can mutate quickly, which can be dangerous due to lack of immunity. The way to tackle pandemics is to achieve environmental sustainability. And their second warming solvency is wrong, as they do not have an internal link to other countries adopting a right to housing, only renewable development, which means that it is backwards. We'll go up. Decoupling is impossible. Jevons paradox. Absolute decoupling on a global scale is impossible, as the Jevons will as emissions renewables are offset by resource use. Stored all 23. Green growth is relying on developing targeted solutions to contradiction caused by internal dynamics. Renewables minimally displacing fossil fuels general use. In addition to reduced emission must be gains, artificial gains offset by research and energy and research gains. Jevons paradox. Efficient gains failing to result in lower total impacts.
Mark the card at even countries.
Okay. You ready?
1 sec. Just one more. Almost. Yeah. 1 sec. Yes.
Okay. How does the revolutionary consciousness solve the computational capitalism that you talk about?
We think that the revolutionary consciousness entails a move away from capitalist systems that looks like retaking labor and opting out, which causes a total collapse of the system.
Okay, so in the world of the alternative, do people get housing?
Do people get housing?
Mm-hmm.
If you're asking if this is like a pick, then I would say no.
That's,
They might.
I mean, okay, but
Do they get
even
housing?
still, like, even if you don't do the act, do people get housing under the world of the alternative?
We would say probably.
How?
How? Well, we would say that collective ownership and socialist understandings of land and property.
What is that? How does that translate into people getting housing?
Well, when we reject the idea of private property and profit and approach things from a different perspective, it reorients the way that we view things like housing.
Okay, it seems that your Beller, so actually, does your all get rid of this state?
Does our all get rid of the state?
Mm-hmm.
As a consequence, probably.
How does the revolutionary consciousness lead to the undoing of the state?
We think that it would entail sort of siphoning off of state power from within, which then replaces it.
What does that look like?
What do you mean, what does that look like?
How do you siphon off state power?
It looks like taking away labor and attention value from the capitalist economy and using that as a sort of method for collapsing the system.
Okay,
while at the same time reappropriating the system's institutions.
Okay, actually, yeah, how does the alt solve the climate crisis?
We think that neoliberalism is the climate crisis, and that by ending neoliberalism, we would end the climate crisis, and that it would push us forward new collectivist, shared humanity understandings of this beyond stealing resources and making money. So, is the racial capitalism thesis separate from the neoliberalism and impact thesis, or are they intertwined? As in, like, if I win the racial cap page, do I also then, like, turn the impact page? I don't really understand what you're asking. Like, do you draw any sort of distinction in the 1 and C, like, between racial capitalism and neoliberalism? I think we have the option to kick the theory of power later on, and we could just go for it separately. But we think that neoliberalism in all forms is bad. But that the way we've read evidence that identifies that the way that neoliberalism operates is under the use of computational algorithms which encode identity as value. Okay. Are we doing 4 or 5 minutes? Do you care? Turn it will be 5. Okay. question was it?
251.
Remaining or used?
Oh, 140. Actually, 209. I can't remember.
209 used? Or
209 left. Okay.
Tell you what, in the meantime, could you tell me what the order is?
Yeah, the order is going to be case in the order of the 1 and C and then the K.
Okay, so it's econ, environment, and then the critique. Alright, I'll open the document.
Okay. Okay. Anyone not ready? Okay. Extend case housing in the hands of private developers guarantees real estate boom and bust cycles, exacerbate macroeconomic conditions, and drive the economy into escalatory recessions. Independently and affordable housing is the largest internal link to structural inequality, which increases a host of existential risks like populism. They say that decline doesn't cause war, but this is wrong. Blue isolates that economic distress empirically has been proven to lead to war. We gave the example during cross-ex of the trade shrinking by 2/3, and then World War II happening. Is B is that the next bubble burst will be worse than the last. That was also in cross and C. Other factors leading to war like nationalism and inequality increase chance of escalation. They don't disprove that the economy doesn't lead to war. Doesn't lead to war. They extend a bunch of arguments as to why decoupling is impossible. But this will be more relevant on the K page. The root cause claims don't matter insofar as we've proven that housing is the biggest cause of inequality now, which means that insofar as we prove that we shift the orientation of housing from a commodity to a social necessity and something that addresses a social need. That means that we access their impact the best. Go to the environment advantage extended here. Unaffordable housing drives urban sprawl, which increases transportation pollution, prevents the geographic concentration needed for renewables innovation. Warming is existential. Tipping points outweigh on time frame and uncertainty. It doesn't matter if housing doesn't spill over. Our evidence isolates housing in the U.S. is key to boost innovation that then spills over. Yes, there's domestic follow-on. Yes, there's domestic follow-on. Given that we're winning the innovation claim, their decoupling stuff doesn't make sense insofar as that we have great evidence. There is evidence that talks about how there's currently fueling a renewable transition. Even if it's true that the Harvard evidence talks about 80% of fossil fuels, it then says that the renewable potential could triple by 2030, which means that we're winning a time frame claim that proves that warming tipping points are coming now, and that we need the apps to solve. Go to the case page. Actually, on the disease scenario, extend that inadequate housing conditions breed viruses. It doesn't matter if they're winning a root cause claim insofar as we're winning time frame. That root cause winning doesn't matter when disease is coming now and economic downturns cause war. That's the diamandis in lieu evidence. On the K proper, 1, the role of the ballot is to determine the desirability of the plan. Anything else is self-serving and arbitrary. Ray the race, the 1AC and Chewy can't catch up, justifying infinite unpredictable interrupts and destroying fairness and clash. Way the applicants have committed the vault. There's no argument free to ideology, which means going for affirmative leaves material oppression in place. Reps versus nonsense for plan is a good idea. And the reps advocating are valuable. All their epistemology and defense points on the framework page are solved insofar as we defend our reps by saying that if our plan is a good idea, then the reps are valuable too. K solves the impact. 1AC hard proves renewables solve warming and resource shortages. That was above. 1AC B, 1AC synchronous is the strongest link to inequality is housing, and C, the time frame disease stuff was also above. They conceded the Fitzpatrick evidence that says that housing rights, whether it creates a psychosocial culture that demands that the government honor its social obligations, energizing and expanding grassroots movements. You can think about how the Second Amendment created the strong gun culture. The AFT was an NRA buck for welfare, which means that our AFT is a prerequisite to any sort of alternative mobilizing, and you can extend the actually perm do both. The AFT is a massive link to making housing more public than private, challenges the capitalist logic of commodification by King Carlson 21. When public goods necessities treated as commodities rather than right to price will ensue commodification of housing and supplementing supplanting social values by pure economic accommodating humanistic degree social and public housing reduce the extent to which private market determines price of housing and life interests rather than those of collective institutions designed to insulate housing with the market. Regular connection between these and address inequality. Social housing requires the secure environmental stewardship. Social housing independence will bottom up abolish social housing levels for people of color. It's racial capitalism. Social housing and take forms of democratic experientialism. Imperative to provide quality affordable housing by federally regulation of provider of social good versus building new public housing. It's not enough to read a link to the state. We've proven in cross that their alternative would get rid of the state entirely, which means insofar as we win that the state is key to provide affordable housing. That's offense for us. The all fails. A reform is better. Capitalist pressure, revolution, and backlash culminates in fascism. Katlinsky 21. Capitalists fight far harder against revolution. The reform is the state was developed to break the revolution. Military is opposed to powerful strategy to reform a revolution. Officials don't want to the breakdown. We prompt authority and people who are less altruistic and less concerned with fairness. Voters tend to shift right for people prone to demagoguery. And B, even if the revolution succeeds, failed institutions fold. Katlinsky 21. The dubious premise that the system will work as socialist economy tomorrow will be so rough, costly, pathological, easy to work, but you act into capitalist much insists with incremental transformation, experimental approach is the only way to avoid devastating blunders that undermine the project. That people will have to rest in smaller changes. And 6, linked to talking about the right to housing is a paradigm shift which rejects the profit motive legend into Bell 20. U.S. housing is barbarism, radical stop to commodification. Mark the bell card at commodification.
Okay. That's good. I'll take credit. Does your interp allow weighing links?
We would say that as long as we get to weigh them against decay, then that's what the interpretation is.
order is cap K, and then it's going to be the sort of, what is it? Cap K, and then the app in the order of econ environment. Is everyone ready?
Yes.
Flex Prep says that we get to weigh the K versus the app and don't need unique links to the plan. You should hold her to it. We'll concede that they get the app, but will win or turn to it, or an impact that outweighs and comes first. The next valid here is that the one error has done insufficient line battling, which means the two error will inevitably be entirely new. The most important concession that should be starred on your flow is that our theory of power has been dropped. Capitalism is more than making money. You should understand the global capitalist system is a computer operated by a global network of algorithms engaged in a racialized calculus due to how this system incorporates race with value, evidenced by the Atlantic slave trade, wherein people were stripped of their status as human and seen as property for the purposes of accumulation. Black folks' credit scores being artificially lowered for no fault of their own, or when we see things like majority minority neighborhoods being devalued by banks as something to fix because they're seen as less valuable. This is all tied to a sinister global redistribution of wealth, resources, and power from the global periphery to the be consolidated in the imperial core. This disproves their cap good claims. Is not only is this system endless racialized dispossession for those it is coded as non-human, but also means that it takes the form of digital authoritarianism. Tech companies are in bed with the government to manipulate our subjectivity. Internet censorship, the fact billionaires and like Bezos own major news outlets, interference in elections in 2016 and 2020, and mass surveillance strategies to control and securitize life. That's drop one and see Beller. That makes it a decision rule. Is endorsing capitalism, is endorsing racism in the real world. So you should reject them on face for that. We'll do the sort of line, but we'll do the alternative here. Vote negative to endorse the collectivist revolutionary consciousness. That entails the occupation, hijacking of institutions, status quo, neoliberal power. Locked in, it looks like the siphoning off of state power before destroying it entirely through dual power organizing and restaking our labor from the system in order to facilitate its impending collapse. We'll answer the permutation. You should reject it on face, especially since hope is extended in econ advantage, which means that the affirmative is definitively capitalist. The one is committed to capitalism. They want the plan for growth, which makes it a non-starter. Links or disadvantages to the permutation winning that the affirmative is capitalist means that our movement fails when combined with it. We'll answer their stuff here. They say that transition fails, but the revolution is possible. You should take a risk because capitalist hegemony now should not be the reason to reject the negative changes. People would revolt, and even more so in the world of the alternative, because capitalism sucks, and no, capitalists don't crush the revolution. America has a massive gun ownership rate, which means that people can and will fight back. Enough of the military will change sides in dual power solves. We slowly weaken the state rather than immediately fight back, which means that they are not strong enough to crush it. And their Kowinski card says, quote, hard to imagine success with any kind without a slow transition. That is us. We don't be the violent revolution, but rather an immediate change in how people do things, and as part of the revolution conscious to create a revolution in the future after the state has been sufficiently weakened. On this sort of, the case solves the impact. No, the case doesn't solve the impact, because we're winning a thesis about how capitalism functions rather than just that. It's the most important thing in the debate, because capitalism is the climate crisis. They've dropped the card that says that the drive for growth necessitates resources to be turned into manufactured goods to generate profit. Capitalism operates based on extracting cheap nature, labor, food, energy, and raw materials. As those things become scarce and expensive, it locks in collapse. This disproves their sustainability claims. Their assumption that capitalism is the thing misses the boat here. This system relies on expansion and intrusion to extract resources or open new markets. This is why European empires fought each other over colonies. As resources become more scarce, countries will fight over who gets them, which turns case and causes war. There is a drive to conquer nature, inherent capitalism in the real world. This looks like causing animals to go extinct in the Amazon or the other remaining bastions of biodiversity. This is because space is used for generational profit, and non-social solutions fail. It's empirically proven that the U.S. has been unable to spur any cooperation over climate. This is one NC soccer, which goes drop over it, which means the app definitely won't be any different. The U.S. and friends haven't addressed the climate crisis because they don't want to, as its effect on the global north will be manageable while being catastrophic for the fourth world. Climate change and extinction and extraction disproportionately affect people in the global south. People in the U.S. or Russia don't care, because climate change will just mean, oh, it's a little warmer, how nice. While for the other half of the world, it will make life hellish as their homes become uninhabitable. The white world does not care about black and brown people dying. This is our theory of power, because the problems it created, and it never will. Racial capitalism is already ready to sacrifice the majority of the world's population just to keep making money off of their backs. In fact, it wants them to suffer so they can be cheap immigrant labor for the north. That ensures extinction, which is the 1AC evidence that is their impact that they have extended, so we should not have to do it here. That means that it is try or die for the alternative. We'll go on to more line by line here. They say that housing makes the government do it. They're misunderstanding our rights. Like the 1AC's rights discourse upholds the idea that social struggle must only be executed via the state. That means that they prevent revolutionary organizing because it limits our ability to build better systems, to rotted over systems themselves. The idea that only legalistic frameworks can address problems or catches the state as the arbiter of the political, and means that you should understand the right to housing as a power. The states framed this thing as sort of a concession when instead it aims to serve the ultimate goals of the system that was above. The terminal is that movements become co-opted, that rather than reclaiming political imagination, the masses are handed out rights as, quote, rewards for accepting the dominant order. That's all one is the LF, and this is another reason that there is no permutation on the links to the state not mattering. It's not not a link to the state, but rather a link to rights discourse in general and how that affects the state. Especially since I have not taken an explicit stance on what the alternative means for whether there is a state or not. It's the way that neoliberal states use rights, which is distinct from our alternative. They say that an institution is full, that was all answered above, and the right to housing reject profit, but a right to housing cannot reject profit if you've read it for the sake of growth, which means that we're definitely winning a very large risk of a complete straight turn to the affirmative impacts. But we're going on to the econ advantage now. The one area who's dropped the cap causes war, which is the 1 and C Robinson evidence. We're not going to go for defense necessarily on their scenario here because it means that it is inevitable. Even if you buy the economic decline causes war, capitalism makes all of their impacts inevitable and terminally non-unique because capitalism faces a crisis of legitimacy. The U.S. has ramped up its fear-mongering in order to scapegoat countries like Russia and China. This is the real reason for the new Cold War. The economy is tied to war making. You should think about why we do things like send weapons to Ukraine and who benefits from that, or who profits from forever wars in Afghanistan and Iraq. That turns the case. That's Robinson, which goes Roth, will independently extend the wall evidence. They say empirics matter, but we've read evidence that says there have been 40 recessions, but only 20 interstate wars, which disproves their empirics here and means that they cannot go over this scenario, especially since we're winning a sustainability claim. Ultimately, the reason that this is a negative ballot is that they have not contested how capitalism works, which means that it is more sinister than just making money, and that you cannot vote affirmative because it endorses these violent systems. We'll go on to the we'll briefly go on to disease here. Diamandis is a bad card and should be rejected, but we're going to extend that disease is inevitable under growth. This card was not interacting with the Warren Template, which is that pathogens are zoonotic and that by destroying the environment, which was all about for why capitalism destroys the environment, that it rises demand for these things and means that zoonotic disease jumps from humans to animals, which makes disease inevitable. It turns the case, it causes racism. Done.
Okay. Speaking to a line. Okay. The order is going to be case and then the K.
Which case?
It'll be disease and then K.
Disease.
Yeah. Okay. Is anyone not ready?
They got to disease with too little time left, extended here, inadequate housing conditions, breed viruses, enable uncontrolled disease spread, enforceable right to housing, solves homelessness, and prevents existential pandemics. This massively outweighs on time frame because too little impact calculus was done in the NRMI. Why climate change comes first. We're winning that the homeless are uniquely vulnerable to disease and that the next virus could come, the worst pandemics could strike us in the near future. That was the Diamandis evidence, which is net better than any argument they try to go for. They try to go for this argument that pathogens, that there's no disease because it jumps from humans to animals because of zoonotic diseases, but this is not enough. given that we've won that the homeless are uniquely vulnerable because they live in squalid living conditions, they're densely crowded, feces contaminate where they're eating and sleeping, which means that there's a high chance that the diseases can not only breed, but they spread quickly and widely, which is a prerequisite to the alternative, because people cannot mobilize and have a revolutionize against the state if they're all dead from disease. The AF is necessary to stop disease now because it's the quickest solution to homelessness. We've won that the AF provides housing, which means it's a question of time frame. So as long as we win sufficient, as long as we win a perm and a sufficient writ that the alt fails, that means that case has to come first. We're going to extend the perm here, that the AF is a massive link to where we make housing more public than private, and we challenge the logic of commodification. Our constant evidence is really good on this. It says that social housing needs to be publicly, quote, back to function at scale. It has an indispensable bottom-up element, but that has to be in addition to state support. It gives the examples of the Black Panther Party, who worked against racial capitalism by calling for private housing and land to be converted into cooperatives to build decent housing, but it was backed by government aid, which means that our AF definitely doesn't link. We'll answer the links here. They said that our econ advantage proves it's capitalist, but it's not enough given that we're winning the thesis of our econ advantage, which is about reducing reliance on the private sector so that the government can provide more affordable housing to solve things like disease, and that we reorient the logic of commodification. They didn't answer this specifically, which means that you should have a very high burden to grant this link, given that the fact that it's just this overall econ link, which doesn't necessarily apply to our advantage. But second, they extend the state link, but they conceded Fitzpatrick, which means it doesn't matter if it extend the Fitzpatrick evidence here that talks about how housing rights creates a rhetoric and a psychosocial culture that demands that the government honor its social obligations, which energizes and expands these grassroots movements. We gave the example in the 1AR about gun culture and how when you say that you have a right to gun, it creates a sense of entitlement, which means that that sense of entitlement and sense of being able to work against the state is necessary, but that's only comes after you guarantee a right. This evidence, when conceded throughout the 1AR2, which means that there's no way that the state co-ops revolutions independently. They misanswered our second piece of Katlinsky evidence that specifically talks about how even if the world was socialist tomorrow, even if the revolution was granted 100% success, the frail institutions would fold anyway. It specifically gives examples about how socialist economies in the past have sucked, and there's no way to avoid this devastating blunders that happen, which means that the system will definitely collapse. They only answered our first piece of Katlinsky evidence. It says that people have guns to fight back, but that's obviously that's non-responsive to our second piece of evidence that says that it would be so rife with consequences, pathologies, it's easy to imagine Democrats going back to capitalism. Good debate.